Hi and welcome to Python Bonanza. This week we will look at something interesting. How can I call a function and do different things depending on what type I have sent to the function? Yes, so we got a question from Pete54 who said, I would like to have a function that behaves differently depending if I send in a list or a string or some other type. So how can I make this function behave differently depending on what type the data I sent to it has? Well, in languages that are statically typed, where we actually define what type something has all the time, this is not really a problem because we can overload functions and say, well, we have one version that takes an integer and one version that takes something else. But as Python is a dynamically typed language, how would we go ahead and do that? Well, actually, there is a tool that can help us with this, and it's hidden in the functools module that comes with Python. So we can import that one and use this tool to accomplish this. And today we will see how we can do that. So let's head over to the screen and have a look how this could be done. So let's say that I have a function here, and let's just call it my func. And this function will take some sort of argument. So in this case, let's just print whatever we got here. So this is kind of the problem, because we can send anything to this one now. There's no problem. So let's have a that. So we can send anything to this. So let's say that I want to send in, I can send in a string, and I can also send in an integer, for example, and I can send in a list of things. So let's have a list of strings. So let's just have some characters here. Something like this. So of course this will work, and running this will, as we can see, just prints whatever we get. So nothing strange there. But the question was that depending on what type these things has, we want to have a different behavior. So let's say if there's a list, we want to do one thing. If it's an integer, we want to do something else. So how could we go ahead and do that? Well, of course, we could create different functions. So my func int, my func string, that would be possible. But a neater way is to use SingleDispatch from functools. So let's import that. So it's called SingleDispatch. And what I do with this one is that I use SingleDispatch to decorate this function here. So I just decorate it with SingleDispatch like this. Now, what I can do after this is that I can go ahead and write other functions here. And these functions, they don't even need a name. And in Python, we don't want to name something. We can just use an underscore like I have here. So I will just call this function an underscore. And then what I can do here is I can say arg, and here I can use type hint to say what type I want this one to handle. So let's say I want this one to handle an int. So just to illustrate that, we end up here when we call the function with an int, we will have a print that says that. So let's say arg is an int, and then let's just print the arg, of course. So let's print it as well. So for this one to react, well, so what I want is I want this call here to activate this function. And right now I want the other two to activate the first one. So we can actually have another print statement here saying, let's say default my func, and then let's just print whatever we are passing in. Okay, so how can we make this function down here now be activated when I'm passing an int but not for the others? Well, the thing what I do here is that I use another decorator on this, and the name of this decorator is the same as this function here. So I would say my func and a dot and then register, like this. Okay, so let's try this, because if this works now, this first one and the last one would call this the default one, but the one where I'm passing an int would call this second one. So let's see. And you can see that is exactly what happens. So this is how I could do it, and of course we could now go ahead and write more of these. So I could have one that would, for example, be activated on, let's say, the list. And here I might want to iterate over the list or something. So let's just print this is a list, and then we go through it. So we have something like 4 item in arg, and we just print the item. And then we do the same kind of decoration that we had up here on this one as well. So this will register. And what would it register? Well, it registers for this type. So it registers for a list. This registers for an int. And for all the others, this default one will be called. So we see we haven't changed anything down here. So let's run this now. And we can see that when I pass in a string, I get the default one. When I pass in an int, I got my int version. And when I pass in my list finally, I get the list version of this function. So SingleDispatch can help us with this, and we can have different versions of a function that can be called depending on the type. So I hope that answered the question, and I hope you can make this useful, because I can find it useful sometimes to have this behavior, especially when we have a language like Python where we don't really specify types. So sometimes it can be really important to distinguish and have different behaviors for different types. So that was all for this week. So I'm looking forward to see you again next week, and please like and subscribe and all that. And if you have a question, send it my way. You have the address now on the screen, and it's also in the description for this video. So have fun with Python, and I'll see you again next week.